spell on you. God. Put a spell on you. God. Put a spell on you. God. Put a spell on you. God.
Peace and Black Power. Welcome to another edition of BABATV here in Washington, D.C., Chocolate City. For all of you who don't know who that is, this is, go-go. D.C. is the home of go-go music. And this is the godfather of go-go right here, Brother Chuck Brown. I'm just here in the alley here, having a good time in Washington today. Coming up on a famous restaurant, even though I don't eat food like this no more, called Ben's Chili Bowl. Ben's Chili Bowl.
Gone this day.
Yes, sir.
Baby.
Brother Tehuti.
You know, on this wall, they had a whole lot of protesters come down here protesting.
Put a spell on you.
They wanted Mrs. Ali to take Bill Cosby down off the wall after all the accusations. And, Miss Ali told him to go take a flying leap. This is our culture. We don't react to, what's going on in their culture that way. It is too bad that all of those accusations came out against Bill. I've seen so many conspiracy theories voiced about what's going on. But again, here, he's one of the community heroes. You are standing at a historic spot for African Americans here in Washington, D.C. Back in the early 1960s, when Ben first came to the city, he started a new trend. And that trend that he started, at the time, a simple hot dog, but on his simple hot dog, he added chili. The second thing, of course, with his half smoke, he added chili, and so the chili dog was born. With that, the business is one of the last of the African American businesses on what used to be, this whole street here was called DC's Black Broadway, because of the Lincoln Theater, which is next to you on the one side, all the way down the street to what is the Howard Theater, which is Washington, D.C.'s equivalent to the Apollo up in Harlem. This was the strip that from the right after World War I, and what was the Roaring 20s in New York City, but this was the roaring strip for Washington, D.C.'s black population. The shows went on here, the celebrities hung out here. Two blocks down is the famous Bohemian Caverns, and there are pictures there of many of the big celebrities of the 1940s and 1950s who used to hang out on this strip. So this was, as I said, all part of what was the core of Black Washington, D.C. However, as of the 21st century, with the new monies rolling into town and the general trend of gentrification going on all across America, U Street is no longer the center of black activity in Washington, D.C. As you can see, it's most of the businesses that have opened up now are the trendy type of urban businesses that's opening all over big cities in America. That's basically welcoming the new urban pioneers, which are new young white folks moving back into these urban cities. They're called urban pioneers. in that status, they get some special tax breaks and other kind of things to come in and take hold of the properties and start their businesses on strips like this. A question is often raised, are we angry? I'm not really angry about it. I'm just revealing what actually is going on. I do remember the summer of 1976 when we were down on the mall, and the song that came out by Funkadelic at that time upset the power structure of this city. And of course, the song I'm talking about is Chocolate City, when George was talking about Washington, D.C., which at that time had its peak in population percentage of about 76% black and 24% other. And at that time, it was called Chocolate City with the vanilla suburbs. And it was true, a very large black population was here, but two things occurred. One, it's a large population of the working class, and the lower working class of the black population occupied the city without the means of the finances of establishing themselves as businesses. Okay, and so it was just occupied without ownership. We were residences of the city as such. And with the wars that came on, what we call the drug wars of the late 70s up through the 80s, and even to some degree it's still going on, but when the crack cocaine epidemic came across America, a lot of the black male population of Washington, D.C. began to be filtered out through the prison industrial complex, through murder, and again the tussle over trying to control what was the drug market. The poverty was ingrained. There's a certain segment of the Washington, D.C. community that hasn't risen up out of poverty since they settled here in large numbers following the Civil War. See, from the Freedmen's Town, the Freedmen's Association, and those things that were set up during the Reconstruction era, a lot of black folk never got to the point of ownership of industry or economics to the standpoint where a self-contained community. Even though the law, as of 1896 in the Plessy versus Ferguson case, which said separate but equal, Washington, D.C. was segregated. As I said, this was the black strip. Of course, the white strip was downtown D.C. But again, we entertained ourselves along the strip. But one of the things that plagued us was not being able to own the buildings themselves. So you have the white banking structure, and you have the white real estate structure, which owned the buildings, and we rented them or leased the space as such. And things was going well up until the major riot of 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and then the poor Washington, D.C., the poverty just exploded. What was burnt down, the disruption, the riot, and what have you, tore up this strip. A lot of the businesses got boarded up, and very few people were willing to reinvest revenue in developing this strip, while, quote unquote, the black masses were angry about the state of their condition. So you're being poor in a land of plenty creates a mentality of anger amongst folks. So when you look around and you're watching TV, or you're coming out on the strip and you see other people living with plenty and plenty of symbols of success or richness, it makes you angry at the fact that you have none, or that you are struggling to have anything to eat. And some of what you're eating is imitation food coming in those packages and boxes, which we still don't know the total outcome of what it does to the mind. But you look at poor kids over and over and over again being subjected to the same things, and here we are in 2016, and a lot of our youth are expressing their anger and disgust about the status that they find themselves in.
Taking it to entrepreneurship.
Well, the key is entrepreneurship, But the key in terms of entrepreneurship is how. See, individual trying to follow individual capitalism, or must we use our economic strength in a different kind of way to ensure our success? See, American capitalism, as a lot of people don't remember, failed. Remember, and the only way that the country was able to continue on, they had a president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that decided that a pure capitalism couldn't work anymore anywhere, and therefore he created what has been since the 1930s a mixed economy. It's mixed with aspects from socialism and with capitalism. Social security system, like is an example of the kind of things that come out of socialism that help prop the United States back up on its feet. When they created what they called the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was again the government creating jobs, all right, for Appalachia, America. And at that time, Appalachia, America didn't have electricity. Most of the homes there didn't have running water or toilets and things of that nature. But because of that Tennessee Valley Authority and the construction that was paid for by the government that went through there, these poor people living up in the mountains and what have you for the first time got electricity. But it also put a lot of people to work. There was also the thing called the 3 C's, the Conservation Corps, that went around helping to revitalize what were the dead farmlands and forestry out in the Midwest, all the way out to the far west, where they cleaned up the forest. They helped to reinvigorate rural America and brought it back. So there were things that the government can do to help people get back up on their feet. But again, most capitalists, being as rich as they are, have the power to control the media, and a rich capitalist can convince a poor person that allowing him to make unheard of profits off of him is a good thing for him. Don't do anything to lift yourself up except if I can't make a dime off you. And you have poor people who think, well, that's a good way to go. I mean, it's just like today I was sitting in the lobby of a facility that had Fox News on, and I normally don't watch this, but I had no choice, it was on, right? And what was really funny to me, these people who basically made the statement, do you realize that a lot of these people think that the theory of what they call manifest destiny, it was God's will that white folks leave England, come across the Atlantic Ocean, commit genocide against the natives who were here, that it was God's will that these same people go off to Africa and bring millions of Africans into captivity and put them in the system of slavery, and it's God's will that they have this country. So they're on a divine mission. And so we are somehow doing something against God's will to want to stand up and just be equal people, to have the human right, the right on this globe to live like all other people live on this globe as such. So they don't understand why anybody would ever want to apologize for any of the negativity and the dirt that their ancestors did in acquiring this land, and what they are doing around the world with their country, with their military in 154 countries, suppressing those countries so that American corporations can sell their goods and enrich the ruling class as such. See, it's a lot that our people really have to learn. But as I was telling you before, one of the things the person was asking, for example, about the creativity of young people who are deciding to go their own way. Again, I'm so proud of the hat I'm wearing. Young brother out of New York City. Brother Mike L. There you go. Here's a brother who just came up with an idea, finding something that was in use and finding a way to add his own touch to it, to create his own business. He has it on the internet and his little business is moving. And that's what I would encourage all young black people to do, all young African people to do. And again, and I'll tell you, you'll find your creativity in how you identify yourself and what culture you really want to link yourself with. You understand you have 5,000 years of recorded history and culture before the captivity, and out of that, there are so many things that you could do to empower yourself, as opposed to only going back to 1619 from the standpoint that when you were in captivity. A lot of you are ashamed of the fact that some of your ancestors were slaves. Why should you be ashamed of that? They didn't willingly become slaves. They were captured and put into the institution. There's no shame in that. But before that, do you realize that out of ancient African history and ancient African culture, there's a story that was so powerful that a few years ago, some modern folks looked at this story and they reframed it and made billions of dollars off of this ancient African story. In the new form, it's called The Lion King. Now, The Lion King, if you just look at the characters as displayed, is a cute little story. But it is a retelling of the story of the fight between Osiris and Set, his brother. The killing of Osiris, and then Osiris' son Horus coming back to avenge his father's death in the form of Simba, the little baby lion. It's the whole story told in a new cartoon form. So just thinking about today's technology and where we are today in terms of our mentality, but looking back at our ancient culture and those stories and those incidents out of our history can be retold in a modern sense. Again, a brother working with some white folks had a series that ran on TV for several years. It was called Stargate. I don't know if you ever watched that, but the characters and the scenery of Stargate, again, was a scientific retelling of the ancient Egyptian story. And here are these folks who did it, not us, not the descendants of that society now, but the folks who did it made billions of dollars and continue to make billions of dollars off of the idea, because I understand that that series is in TV reruns and are on DVDs where you can sell it, or what do they call it, Bluetooth or Blu-ray. So other people know who we are, know how to look at our history and our culture, dig into it, and use it in a modern sense, in a modern setting, be very creative with it, and empower themselves economically. And that's what I would suggest. Yes, start your own business, but look at the roots. Well, I look at you, I look at the roots of who you are and where we come from, and out of that mentality, again, will come, is the key to your success. Because what we are, we will want to be again. And those that are walking around sleep like the walking dead, the young folks are waking up. You see that bus pull up here and all those white folks just got off?
Yes, sir.
The place up.
Yes, sir.
One of the most famous places in D.C. It's a tourist stop now. I mean, you know, like the word is out, and a lot of tour groups who come to Washington, D.C. want to stop up here on your street. And I mean, every day I see buses just like that one stop and unload, busload of folk. They all run in because they want to check out Ben's Chili Bowl, you know, because it's become that famous as such. You know, the product is good, but just the idea of a successful African American entrepreneurship, white folks want to experience it. See, I mean, it's like the, I remember a few years ago, what's the guy, he calls himself Bill Riley, went to meet Reverend Al Sharpton up at the black restaurant in Harlem. Mm-hmm. And he went in and said, hey, and the people were well-mannered, and they wasn't cussing and fussing, they wasn't calling each other MFs. I mean, Bill Riley actually said this on TV, that he was shocked to go into a black entrepreneurship, a business, and see it run as a genuine American business. Normal. We can do that, but it surprises other folks. So now tourists want to come see a successful black business in Washington, D.C. And Ben's Chili Bowl is at the top of the list. What is religion? Religion are these man-made systems that are instituted to try to implement a drama that some people have determined is the correct view of what the divine is and what sacredness. See, what is sacred and what is divine. See, so you have different people who from time to time say they've gotten a visitation of some type from someone that are divine that gave them some information. And then with that information, these people form a system of trying to implement what the rules that come down from what these people have said. I mean, if you're going to take old, Judaism, if you're going to take Buddhism, if you're going to take Christianity or what have you, you always have somebody who came along and wrote a story, and then you have a class that creates themselves a priest class that arrogates to themselves the right to define what these writings say and what they mean. And so these priest class then develop these what you call religions. See, the divine figure that is talked about in the context of the text, none of them said create a religion. As such, there's nothing about it. But the priest class that develop from these groups end up creating the religions themselves, as such. So I think, unfortunately, what man has done with the tool of religion, they've made religion one of the most central tools of the chaos and ignorance of humankind. Because in each case they're talking about one thing, but in each case they all want to be the absolute correct one. See, which one is right? Which one is the correct one? Well, look, if you all have an idea, you all come from different cultures, you all had different circumstances, but you all drew a very similar conclusions. I can understand then how you would all have similar type religions as such. But you would have, if you were intelligent, you would understand that all of you from your different perspectives are talking about the same thing, but using different terminology. But because they want to be right, and which one is the absolute, the correct one, they end up fighting with each other. A book is not getting up, walking around, shooting people. You're right, the people who've been taught a specific way of reading a book are going around, shooting and killing people and themselves as such, but again, the drama, listen, a drama written about the world of 2,000 years ago and its specific circumstance is very difficult to follow here in contemporary times. A drama written to talk about events that took place 1,500 years ago, 1,600 years ago. It's very difficult to implement the literal understanding of what was written for people of the mentality of 1,500 years ago and to try to implement that today. See, that's just stupidity. That would be like saying, well, if modern black people can't go back and learn the original language when they were the original when God's first children, right, the original people, if we can't speak the original language from the first time we appeared on earth as humans, then, we can never succeed as such. No, religions themselves are systems. What is divine? See, like in the ancient world, we talked about the feminine, masculine principle of divineness. In some aspects, in those societies that were male dominated, the divine is only masculine. God, he. Okay. See, religions are as confusing as identities that we try to assume today, as opposed to who are we? Are we from a land base? Should the language we speak, the land base of our fathers, the culture of our fathers be the substance of how we determine who we are and where we are today? The people say that if we are the son, in God's first, after humankind came into existence on this earth in the Olival Gorge of East Africa, if Africans are the first beings and somehow through our longevity on the earth there have been periods of mutation of the original man, where we have the human family as we see today, still the first of that human family is the original black man. See? So no matter what, on that journey we have stopped in many places along the way. And in those different stops, we were called different things. There are some people who want to go back to, like I said, 1,000 years ago, and let's call ourselves what we were called 1,000 years ago. There are some people who want to go back 5,000 years ago and say, let's call ourselves one branch of our family who broke away from the core group went off. Let's call ourselves that. There's another group. Now, we had a period of glory where we ruled half the world, for 700 years. Let's call ourselves by the name we had during that time period. You got one man on this long, long journey, as our ancestors said, riding in this boat of 1,000,000 years. on this long journey, who's been called many things. But instead of seeing himself as this one human being, he wants to be a human being from a specific time set, adding confusion to who he really is. Be the original man. Be who you are. Wake up and really read the documents and see who you are. Don't get caught up in the details of the stories that's been handed down. You don't have today a complete script as first written thousands of years ago. All along the way, people have altered and edited the scripts. All right? So what you're seeing today is not the original script. If we go back to early last century, in the form of one of the brothers who's called the prophet, Noble Drew Ali, he combined information from several sources to be the source for the modern, as he called it, Moorish American, not just the Quran. When the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, from his teaching, added teachings from the Christian Bible as he was teaching Islam in this country in the 1940s and 50s and raising up the nation of Islam within his society, but not using what would be called the exact so-called pure book that comes out of the area that's been redesignated as the Middle East. How do we know how to accept and understand what was actually written and said during the lifetime of an individual, and then what these priest class over the years end up writing later, all saying, well, they heard that this person said this, or it came down to them that this person said this. So way after the fact, you have people writing and putting forth what people take today as divine words uttered from a divine being, not knowing it's just something that an individual wrote down. That's it. And will kill you over it. See? So if you ask what religion is, a ball of confusion. In fact, like that great group out of Detroit from some years ago, it had a great record which basically explains what religion is. It's a ball of confusion. And why does it keep the people confused and at each other's throat? And as you're pulling the puppet strings with all the confusion going on, a small group of people can control and run everything and profit from it. It's it. So again, I know what's going on. I mean, I've watched the DVDs. I watch the YouTube channels now, your channel. I watch Brother Sanetta's channel. And the one thing that I'm happy to see that brothers are reading, that they've been inspired to want to be more than just what they are. So it's a good thing that young folks are reading and studying and learning more about the different groups of ancestors and the different successes that people had in various places, all right, in the ancient world. We wasn't just successful in Egypt. We weren't just successful, as Moors when we went into Spain. We weren't just successful in Southern Africa and what was Mano Napata and what is modern Zimbabwe. Wherever we went, we were successful. In fact, what the European is finding out now, what he thought was the timeline that he established and what he thought was the world's people as he knew, there were other people. There have been civilizations that have been totally destroyed. There have been people. They are finding remnants of civilizations below the ocean levels, off the coast of India, off the islands of Japan. Excuse me. So So the European view of what the world is and what world history is, modern man is beginning to find out. Well, he's been shucking and jiving. He's been trying to tell the story from his point of view as far back as he can remember when he came through some sort of consciousness. That's his view of the world is not the story of the world. It's a story of the world. See, and the confusion is the fact that he wants to insist that other people accept what he thinks is the story of the world, to accept that as their story. There's an old African proverb I like to tell people. They say, the hunter will always be thought to be a mighty person bringing down the lions in the jungle. And that story will always be told until the lion tells his side of the story. Yes, that, see? Because the hunted has a story as well as the hunter who has a story. You know,
got somebody, excuse me, I don't mean to cut you off, T. I got somebody, step up, brother, that recognizes this brother right here, and tell the people what you just told me, brother.
Yeah, what I was saying is, his brother runs a store, Children of the Sun. But I learned a lot by coming to their bookstore years ago, and this is how I became well versed in the knowledge that I know now, because this brother's brother Tehuti.
Yes, sir.
You
There
see?
you go.
And I was raised up in the knowledge, but right now, this is my son over here. Right now, I learned a lot from this. I learned a lot from this brother right here. And right now, I come to their store right now today. Okay, this is the store that everybody should go to. It's called Children of the Sun.
That's the new name. When you were coming up, we were the House of Kemet.
Yeah.
Yep, 2822 Georgia Avenue. Yes,
I
sir.
got your DVD too, brother.
All right, my brother. Good seeing you again.
See you, brother Tehuti.
All right, sir.
That's why I stopped myself and said, wait a minute, that's brother Tehuti.
Yes, he did. All right, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Again, that's nice knowing that there are people who do remember. You know, like when we were, the store was a center of activity and consciousness. You know, like up on George Avenue, and at the time, it's, you know, like I've moved on in a different direction. But again, Brother Rafu still has a store up on Georgia Avenue under a new name, Children of the Sun. And so to get the in-depth information that will really get you started, go up and buy a book. Say, look at the black book. Look at a black bookstore. Look at the topics on the shelf. A lot of you don't even know all of these topics have been written by so many black folks. But a lot of people accept the proposition that was taught to us during the period of our captivity, that we were just ignorant savages waiting, quote unquote, in Africa for the European to come along and rescue us and bring us here and put us through a treatment so that we would be worthy to accept his religion. All right. In fact, he said his greatest success was getting these Africans that he brought to this country, not just to speak his language, not just to wear his clothes, not just to call themselves by his names that he gave them, but also to accept the religion that he gave them and to accept the book that he said is divine, that he gave them as absolute and divine. So the question is he 100% successful? Well, not 100%. Capitalism, the nature and the history of this country, will break a man's spirit down. See, like, and if you can't be anything else, you know, like brothers who end up getting caught in the web set up in the prison industrial complex often go off, and in that context, when they have been silenced and stilled and they have time to think, a lot of these brothers pick up a different perspective on how they view themselves.
We can be black.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, the words mean black. You know, like in terms of most other peoples who saw us described us, and descriptions of us come out in terms like ebon, like Moor. Those are descriptions. Ethiopic is a description. Burnt-faced people. See, like we didn't have quote unquote nation state name descriptions. It's just, you know, like for a European, again, to see somebody full of color and melanin like black folks was just so amazing that that's what they said. Look at them. They are black. They are More if you're French. They are, if you're Greek, Ethiopic. See, these were terms that describe the person. If they were the later languages, the Latin-based languages like Portuguese and Spanish, Negro is a description. It's not a nation state. See, so we were always being described, and so some of us today want to go back and find a name in the description in order to find some sense of pride. It's okay. It's okay. It's a step forward. Just don't get stuck on a description. Say, be a man first. Be a human man. You're the original man. You don't have to say anything else. Everybody knows that. See, like if you really believe in the literal translation of your holy books, first man that was created, all the science, all the universities will tell you where the first human beings came from on this earth. See, and you can't have a conflict between the first human beings on this earth being African Coming from Africa, you can't have a conflict with knowing that and understanding that the first man was black. Now, what happened? No science can answer the question to this date. How and why did the original human beings mutate to become the variety of colors and descriptions of human beings that we have on the earth today? You have the original of the originals, and the one thing we know, that from the original of the originals, every other thing that you see can come into existence. If the original mutates, if something happens, still you got the original human being, and in fact, we have what's the condition? We call it albinism. What is that disease that Michael Jackson had? That is when he began to lose the melanin in his skin, and there you go, that term there. See, then he decided to go all the way. So we know as an absolute fact that from the original of the originals, that mutations occur. And if you look around at the rest of the globe, you're looking at the original man, and you're looking at his children. Descriptions, symbolic language, all of those are tools of humankind. See, anything that's created by human beings, it's a tool that he created. It doesn't have power over him. He maintains power over it.
Right.
It's the exception, like in this society, humankind made money, a medium of exchange. See, but in this society now, people bow down to money, something that they made as such. There are things that coming up out of poverty, and when you are thought to be a poor black person, and you get successful without being educated, what is it that a lot of people will go out and do? Buy a whole lot of stuff that are symbols of them being poor no more. The big gold chain around the neck, the big diamond in the ear, or what have you, the studded diamond earrings and those are symbols of success. They don't do anything to improve your condition, but now you can go around, when people see you with those things, they will no longer think that you are poor. See, so poverty is a mental state as well as an actual physical condition. But being poor mentally is a whole lot worse than being poor substantively, because you can change your substantive poverty. It takes an education to change your mental poverty. The one thing about the divine that I know is absolutely true, the divine also is alive and continuing to become. See, the divine is not something that existed some billions of years ago, created the universe and reality, and is still that exact same being today that it was at the beginning of time. That doesn't make sense. The divine also has evolved. Like the translation, I am that I am, should be I am that I am becoming. Kepara. See, just like I explained to people again about various aspects of things that we see in life. As long as we have the breath of life in us, we are continuing to become what we are going to become. We don't stop. Even death doesn't stop a being from becoming. One of the things that I have to seriously take into consideration as I'm experiencing more and more of the ailments of old age, that we might not have a lot of additional opportunities to share, very serious thoughts. But look, for our people, we've come on a long journey over this past 400 years. The future is in the hands of young folk. All of us old people, we've done our thing. We've left a mark somewhere. We've left you some information. But the future is in your hands. And whether or not, what path, I should say, that you're going to walk should be very carefully thought out. The experience of our captivity in and of itself has created at least what I like to call 6 different type of mentalities amongst black people in this country. What I call the sane ones of us, those who were brought into captivity were African people, all right? And those of us today and our outlook on the world, from an African perspective, the African nationalist way of thinking, the African American nationalist thought pattern is closer to being more healthy than those who say, no, I have no sense of who I am or no pride in it. And I'm one of those out here who want to assimilate into white society. Now, the nature of slavery and the nature of the behavior of the slave master was such that his raping of the female African created a mixed race being in America that didn't exist beforehand. But he and his mentality was such that he created a condition called the one-drop rule. And therefore, people who looked as white as him, whose hair was as straight as his and everything since they were his children, because they had one drop of black blood, were forced to be grouped with black people and live the same experience. Well, it's out of that mentality that these people develop an idea of, let me assimilate into white society. Then you have those closer to them who want to integrate. I know I'm black, I know I'm African, but the best thing for me is to integrate into the white man's society. I don't want to do nothing on my own. I don't want to have nothing on my own. I don't really want to relate. I think the best society is an integrated one. My mentality is, I believe in the theory of the melting pot. As long as everything is melting into the pot, if you know, like I said, if the main in the melting pot is white, as long as it's white language, is the white clothing style, is the white values, is the white religion, everybody melts into that. You can't melt and maintain anything of your own. But that's a theory, and some people think that way. I'm not making it right or wrong. I'm not making it good or evil. I'm just saying understand that there are people who have different mentalities because they've had different real experiences. You can't have an experience, you cannot know an experience not having lived it. You can read about it, you said you can relate to it. But depending upon what one's experience is, that's what one's mentality is. But the great majority of our people are what we call accommodationists. They accommodate themselves to whatever is the latest thing. They haven't a solid ideology, as the saying goes. Well, as long as we have these different flows and these different thoughts within our community as a whole, we're going to have people who won't come together to accomplish anything from one perspective. Don't make it bad. Educate. And understand that the key to moving forward always is doing so organized, not as individuals. An organized group goes much further than single individuals. There weren't individuals that got us out of captivity. It wasn't single individuals that got apartheid shut down in this country. It's the organized efforts of people getting up as student organizations, as group organizations, as old historic organizations that really move people forward. So the best lesson for the future is not being an individual as individualism is taught in this society, but think of moving forward organized in groups to be successful. Again, as we're standing out here on the famous U Street corridor of Washington, Northwest Washington, D.C., we're standing at the Lincoln Theater. For years, this was, as we called it, Black Broadway. And as you can see, what was once a all-black neighborhood with only black traffic, as you can see from the number of people moving up and down the sidewalks as we've stood here, that the general resident who traverses these sidewalks today has really changed. Yeah, we're moving up toward, again, if any of our first persons who walked these sidewalks during between World War I and up through the Korean War would come back and walk these streets today, they would be totally shocked at how U Street has changed. But walking down 125th Street in Harlem today is different than when I walked down 125th Street in Harlem back in 1972, the first time I walked the streets. So, as we move forward, time changes, things move forward. The one thing that you'll find in most of the communities that we once resided is that in this new push or this new phase of capitalism, they decided to come back into the inner cities, rebuild them, and make them quite useful for themselves for the 21st century. With the cost of transportation rising as it is, in terms of automobile costs, gasoline costs, and what have you, the main population is moving back into the cities because the cities will be the end spots of the 21st century, and not like the bombed out looking buildings as they were during the last quarter of the 20th century, between 1975 and 2000. So as you can see, again, another big building going up. Here's a building. It has a name. 13th and U will be the name of the building right where we're standing. Here to my right is the famous Ellington building. Now, of course, the building is named in honor of Duke Ellington, because Duke Ellington hung out on the street. In fact, he lived one block off of this street. Down on T Street was his mother's home, was where he grew up in this area. But I saw what's going on in Detroit, Michigan, as it's trying to come back, as it's being revitalized. I saw what went on up in New York City. I see what's going on here in Washington, D.C., and you can actually see the trend in the change and the transformation. It's not about racism anymore as much as it is economics. And the economics of the future is that the modern American cities are being designed to be a different functioning type of place with little small businesses, like the Starbucks, and businesses of that size, as opposed to these big giant businesses to occupy the sidewalks of the new American city. What you need to get educated. And once you're educated, then you can think in a different context. You don't need to be a wage slave in the 21st century. Be a business owner. Use your brain power to create an industry or something that you can do, a product that you can sell in order to be in the marketplace. Just don't maintain the mentality that you're being educated in order to get a job. See, that's a form of brainwashing, or the new term they use is called social engineering, to make you think and stay in that mentality. So all our little kids, what do you send them to school to say to do what? In order to get a job. You send your kids off to college, you tell them to do what? In order to get a job. Well, see, it's the mentality of what you're sending folks off to do and the frame of mind you're trying to prepare them for. You ever thought of taking your kids out through the parks or in a wooded area, so they can go through the forest? Maybe something innate within their own minds will snap and they'll see something else they want to do. Have you ever taken your kids down on a farm so they can see farm life and farm animals and see something else? Maybe something internal in their minds will snap and they'll wake up and it's something else they'll want to do. Just don't tell your child that they must be sent to these institutions to be trained to prepare them just to have a job. Tell them they need to have a way of taking care of themselves. Yeah, they have to have a way of taking care of themselves, in life. But the answer to taking care of yourself and creating a family and taking care of that family doesn't rest with just having a job. You want to have a source of income. You want to be able to provide, for your family and your community. And that's a different mentality. And if we stop using the wrong terminology to describe what we really want for our folk, maybe we will begin to understand that we will start getting different results from our youth. But if you're just trying to put them into a mentality that the only thing they are good for is to go to work for somebody else, then they won't grow, our community won't grow, and you'll continue to see the lack of interest by them in the school systems. It's the same thing with the young warriors. Again, you can't train a thoroughbred horse to be a plow horse. If you want that thoroughbred horse to do what it can do and get out there and run on that racetrack, you have to give him a different type of training than what type of training you would give to that plow horse as such. So it's the same thing that's trying to fit our boys into this a round peg into a square hole isn't working. And we continue to say that something is wrong with the people who are dropping out of the school system. Maybe something is wrong that they are not they know that they are being miseducated and they are rejecting it. You know, you're trying to make somebody that's a champion to think that he's a loser, and he's not going to go to school every day and keep hearing the term that you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a loser. Why should he maintain interest? Why would he be interested in that? And you say something is wrong with him because he won't accept the social engineering that you're trying to put on him, trying to explain to him that his mentality, that his highest capability is only working for somebody else. So again, we have to rethink how we use language and how we try to instruct our young people to be interested in creating something in the future for themselves.
Appreciate that, brother.
Okay.
All right, man. All the best, man.
Thank you very much.
Check it out.
Okay.
Right,
Oh man, it's interesting that how you can raise interest, you know, like in other people. But again, I think we're approaching the building where one of the Supreme Court justices live, up here on U Street, just to show you how again, the community has changed. All of this is new as compared to what was here in the mid-1970s. And as we're heading up to what we would call the famous corner of what was 14th and U Street Northwest. And what was really famous about 14th and U Street Northwest, this is the intersection coming up where the 1968 riot in Washington, D.C. actually got started. It was what we call the central location. Again, 14th Street in itself, the cross street, running north and south here in the District of Columbia, again was a street where there were a lot of community businesses. It was famous more for its creative nightclubs along the strip. I use the term creative. There were some nice lounges and some nice things going on. I heard someone talking about one of the industries that are quite prevalent here in the African American community, when they had numbers, the numbers game, the numbers runners, the numbers backers, and what have you. And it is said that a lot of that activity was centered on 14th Street here in the northwest section part of town. Over in northeast, it was Benning Road, 8th Street and Benning Road for the most part, and in I think in southeast Washington, Nicholas Avenue, it was called, and Alabama Avenues at the time, were the centers of where a lot of the brothers who created their unique community lotteries, you know, like for the working class people, is where they were headquartered. And you realize that the modern Powerball, Megabucks, and all of those lottery systems is a example of the type of industry that used to be run in our community by ourselves, that has been taken over and now is run by the state itself. In other words, the brothers had a great idea and was making good money off of it, but again, once the state itself took it over, you know, they decided now they're going to make all the profits. Here's another one of our alleys in the District of Columbia, which is demonstrating some of our artwork. There's Toussaint Louverture, just to show some of the consciousness that people have and the symbolism that the local artists used. I think this is a tribute to different roles that Paul Robeson played in the movies. In fact, yeah, this is the Paul Robeson wall. I'll correct that. And as you can see, there's a reproduction of his signature. Here he was an international politician. Here he is speaking in Paris, France. And you know, Paul Robeson, again, was one of the brothers who was shut down. His passport was taken from him because he was an international socialist. Because again, that's not the type of economic system that the white folks in America had approved that black folks could think about. So they snatched his passport. They also took W.B. Du Bois's passport, and Du Bois didn't get his passport back until I think the early 1960s. And soon after getting it back is when he left the United States to move to Ghana. But this is a tribute to Paul Robeson. Paul was a social activist. He was an athlete. He was an entrepreneur. Let's see, what else? He was an actor. Peace, brother. And he was, quite the American statesman during his era. Another compliment to the brother. Yeah, I'm not going to follow them around the corner.
Oh my God, he made you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, indeed. But yeah, man, 25 years ago, Dave, Bob Every Time Fire was running around here in Washington, D.C. It was the last few kicks, I guess, of Chocolate City. And the city really has changed. It really has changed. It's kind of hard to believe that this is Washington, D.C. in 2016. Again, the fact that the last year of the first admitted African American president is pulling out of here soon, and to some degree, some of the folks had some sense of pride every time the brothers motorcade would go by, even though the presidential motorcade traveling in the city really blocks up traffic. Everything stops when the president is moving, as such. And again, as we're getting closer to the this intersection of 14th and U Street, the one thing I want to say, I'm sure all of you have heard about the travails of the former mayor of Washington, D.C., Marion Barry. Well, while Marion Barry was mayor, he came up with an idea that he wanted to get this 14th and U Street corridors revitalized. And he came up with an idea that was definitely unique for this part of town. Instead of building his municipal activities downtown as it had been since the city's founding, Marion Barry decided to build a administrative center uptown here in Washington, D.C., and this is the Reeves Center that Marion Barry had built here to be the anchor, that once there was a government building placed up here at this intersection, that it would actually anchor and be the place that, with the number of government employees working in the building, now the little small shops and restaurants would have a customer base so that they could come back and be revitalized, as well as what they call the happy hour idea, in terms of when these employees got off work, there were some of these bars would have more customers to utilize their facilities because of this building being placed here. Well, here we are 20 years after the building was completed, and this area of Washington, D.C. definitely has been utilized. But I think it was right there on that corner where the McDonald's is today. Used to be what at the time I think it was called a People's Drug Store, and a trash can was picked up and thrown through the window of the People's Drug Store there, and that was the first incident in the 1968 riot in Washington, D.C. And this whole area went up in smoke. All the way down from here, all the way down. In fact, the National Guard, when they brought the National Guard in to guard the city, they formed their lines down at 14th and K Street, and that was the borderline. As long as the black folks stayed north of K Street up in this area, burning and destroying, it was okay, but they could not go across K Street into what is really central downtown, where most of the federal government facilities and buildings are. But this is unbelievably the rebuilt Washington, D.C. And again, in the 1970s, in the 1980s, this area was so rough right here. I mean, this was almost drug dealer heaven. And now, again, the population has totally changed. Whereas back in 78, 79, you wouldn't see, the population walking the street at this intersection that you see today. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are very interested in what's going on. It's just that, again, the new technology being used by one of the internet directors, one of the more famous internet channels personalities, who spent a lot of time in his youth in here in Washington, D.C. He's moved out of the city, but he's back taking a look at it. And the new look Washington, soon to come back. Now we are, the other thing that's different up here, we're going to move down. This is the last block of the commercial area of U Street. Like I said, it was famous, bustling out Black Broadway from 7th and what is Florida Avenue today, all the way up here to 15th and U Street. 15th Street, the next block is where the Black Broadway ended. Today, it is has one of the I'll say one of the better senior citizen facilities in the District of Columbia is the Paul Laurence Dunbar Senior Citizen Center, which is housed here at 15th and U Street. And what's great about it is when we get down there, I want you to see the mural that's painted up on the wall. You know, like again, because the residents here are part owners of the facility. Again, another one of the things put in place by Marion Barry when he was mayor of the city was as a way to I'll say a safety bump for the residents of a lot of these buildings to make sure that they wouldn't get put out or just moved out in any kind of way, that the residents of all apartment buildings and what have you in the city have a right of first refusal when the owners want to sell the building. And at this facility here, once the owner wanted to sell the building, the residents got together and formed a tenants association and were able to purchase the building. So this is one of the few facilities, one of the apartment building complexes in the city. It has partnerships. In fact, I think it was in the early 2000s Olympics, there was a young African American gymnast named J.L. Lynch that I think he got one of the medals at the Olympics. But anyway, he is now in construction and property ownership. And J.L. Lynch is in partnership with the Paul Laurence Dunbar Tenants Association in terms of ownership of this facility. And it just goes to show that even though a lot of people still talk so negatively about Marion Barry because of his personal behavior, he was a brother that never got accused of stealing any money in any way from the city government. He never got accused in any way of taking any kind of bribes or any money under the table for anything. But the one thing that he was accused of was being a people's mayor and doing what he could to enhance the quality of life for the residents of this city. And this senior citizens facility here is an example of the type of partnership between the D.C. Mayor's Office on Aging, private developer and J.L. Lynch, and again, and the residents who formed an association to purchase this. You see the backyard back here? This is our backyard. This 10-floor facility with balconies and what have you. Parking lot and all on the facility. Is a pretty nice facility for senior citizens in the District of Columbia, especially on this part of town. And as we get to the corner of our tour, you look back down in the other direction on U Street. Again, we'll have a view of, again, what is this intersection at 15th and U ends what was Black Broadway. Now, the next block over is the famous 16th Street corridor. Of course, 16th Street is noted for it runs in, it butts into the White House, where the president's residence is. And as you do a 360 behind you and with the camera, and up that wall. Yeah, but it ain't right. Yeah, but this is it. As you look back down, in fact, we get a red light. What I want to do, we're gonna walk out in the middle of the street and take a look back down U Street, so you can see it from the middle of the intersection. Okay, yes, we just cross over here again. From here at 15th and U, if you look back down in that direction, see it goes all the way down. Again, we're at 15th, it goes all the way down to 7th Street, so 8 full blocks of U Street. That was quite a corridor for, again, businesses and entertainment for Washington, D.C.'s African-American community. The capital city of the United States of America has definitely gotten in line and decided to join the modern age, as it were, and at the expense of what was a large African-American population. But as some folks say, a lot of folks, if you go out in the neighboring counties, especially Prince George's County in the state of Maryland, that probably at least 1/3 of DC's black residents moved to Prince George's County. And there are some folks who estimate that the figure might even be higher than 1/3. But it lost especially the upper class, the upper working class, whereas Prince George's County and Montgomery County, Maryland, collectively are the 2 richest counties of black wealth in the United States of America. That's how much wealth are in those 2 counties that moved out of the city. And again, because of the jobs, high government jobs with a lot of very important companies that are here because it is the seat of the national government, that not so much as business owners, but having high income, a lot of the folks, high income black folks, moved out into the suburbs and didn't invest any monies in entrepreneurship in any of the businesses along what was Black Broadway. You can't blame them for not having the mentality of wanting to be owners of anything, because again, for 25 and 30 years, the one thing that was just drummed into their head was just have a job, get a job, get a job. So a lot of our kids go to college very specifically to learn a skill in order to get a job. They're not getting educated so they can create something of their own.
Well, on that note, Brother Tehuti, it was good to see you. I'll be back before you know it, and thank you for this very informative tour and the changes. This look like a whole, I see white folks every damn where, places they wouldn't dream setting their foot without getting tore up.
Well, that's the other sad thing is that a lot of there's a lot of petty crime that's picking back up. Since they have moved into the neighborhoods, that these cats are going out walking these dogs late and doing other kind of things that have to change their habits too.
We're gonna do this one for the Godfather, Chuck Brown.